All right, so today I want to talk about breeding rodents as a food source for your ball pythons. And let me tell you, over the years, I've produced lots and lots of rats and mice. I probably produced over 10,000 rats to feed these snakes over the last few years. And let me tell you, I got to the point where I was just tired of breeding rodents and I decided to completely get out of it. Sold all of my rats, sold all of my mice, and believe it or not, I actually sold all my rodent racks too, and decided to go 100% frozen thawed for my ball pythons. And in this video, I want to go over some of the cons of breeding rodents and probably some of the cons that you haven't considered. If you're thinking about scaling up your rodent breeding operation, I want to go over how in some cases you probably will need on a limited scale to breed your own rodents, especially if you're breeding ball pythons. I also want to go over the economics to see if you're actually making any money breeding your own rodents. And I'd say in most cases the math doesn't really work out. You might think you're making money, but if you actually look at everything, you're probably not making any money breeding your own rodents. I also want to bring you online and show you where you can buy frozen rodents in bulk at wholesale prices. Let me tell you, those prices are pretty low. I doubt that the average breeder can actually compete with those prices. And if you do decide to breed rodents, I also want to bring you over to the internet. I want to show you some high-end rack systems, kind of the systems that I had that work really well for breeding rodents. They're really easy, really high quality. I also want to show you some cheaper alternatives. I'm thinking about picking up some smaller rodent breeding cages that are pretty interesting that I found over on the internet. And the interesting thing is I decided to get back into posting YouTube videos every single day again. And I reached out to Rodent Pro and I was like, hey, can you give me a discount code that my viewers can see? You know, underneath the description, I can post the discount code. Not only did they give me a discount code, they also gave me some merch too. So check out this shirt. A really cool Rodent Pro shirt that they got me. In addition to this one, check this out. They also gave me this one. A nice red shirt. That's pretty cool. Two shirts, and they also gave me this. Check this out. I thought this was pretty interesting. They gave me a box of gloves, which I didn't think they would actually send me. They are really religious when it comes to biosecurity. I was thinking I should probably do the same thing if I'm breeding rodents, to wear the gloves and the masks just to protect not only me, but to protect the rodents too from anything that I pick up along the way. So what I want to do is I'm going to go over some of the cons of breeding rodents. And I guess one of the biggest things that a lot of people don't think of is the mental component. So when I first started breeding rats, I decided to get one of those ARS caging racks, and I filled it with hundreds of rats. And I kept thinking, boy, if these rats get out in my house, they could be devastating. They could, chew everything up. I don't know if I could find them all. They'd just be like in everything. And I was actually having nightmares over rats getting out, especially up here in the mountains where the bears can get in. If a bear got in and tore up a rodent rack, and there'd be like hundreds of rats running around, I literally had nightmares. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I was like, what was I just dreaming about? Rats running around the house. And it took me, I'd say at least 6 months to a year before I realized, yeah, those rats aren't getting out of that. And they're not getting out of an ARS caging, a really high-end system to contain those rodents. So that was an unexpected mental component. I'd say another one is euthanizing the rodents. You think, yeah, I'm just gonna buy a bunch of rodents, breed them, scale it up, and I'm going to feed my snakes. But the thing is you have to actually euthanize them. And I was euthanizing with CO2, which is pretty much the most humane way. And let me tell you, when you start killing a lot of animals week after week after week, it kind of wears on you. I'd say it's hardest at first, and you kind of get used to it. But then after thousands and thousands of animals that you're putting down, it's just like, especially at the end, after it was like, I think I euthanized like 10,000 rats. I was just like, I can't do it anymore, which is an unusual mental component. I'd say in the first place, if you can actually do it, that's, you have to actually be able to do it. That's kind of the hardest part. The other thing that I found difficult was the smell. So every now and then you'd have a rat that would like die of old age and kind of smell up the house. You can kind of dig through your rack and find it and toss it out. But the waste would build up in the tubs, and it gets to a point where your house starts smelling pretty bad. And the problem is is when the rat tubs need to be cleaned, your whole schedule is put on hold. It's like the #1 priority is to go down and clean the rats. Everything else takes a pause, which can be really inconvenient, especially if you have a really busy schedule. I mean, you have to really stay on top of it. You just can't, I've tried a couple times to delay it. It only makes things worse. Let me tell you, you need to stay on top of the smell. That's pretty crazy. The other thing is the dust. So I didn't think that rats would be that dusty, but I think what the dust is from is, especially if you have like a large ARS rack, you have these big bags of rat food and you're actually scooping out of the food bin and putting it in the back tray of the back of the rodent rack. And essentially what happens is every time you scoop, a little bit of that food dust kind of gets up in the air and kind of goes all through the house. And after years and years, especially if in the little places you haven't dusted, it builds up quite a bit and you get a really dusty environment. Especially I had the rodents here in my snake room, and it's like in between the tubs on top of all the racks, I had a lot of dust build up in there. And it's kind of hard too. In order to clean them, you'd have to pull every tub out and all the snakes and you know, just like some people actually spray down all their snake racks because of all the dust from the rodents. So that was kind of unexpected too, all the dust. The other thing that takes a lot of time with rodents is the organization. So you have to get to the point where, you know, you can't produce too much, or you don't want to be without rodents. So you're always like trying to produce the right size at the right time. And the problem is if you just ignore your rats for like 2 weeks and you come back and then all of a sudden your weanling rats are already like large rats. And you don't need large rats, maybe you need weanling rats, and you already missed the window. So you have to constantly check. You have to figure out, you know, who's pairing with who and move your males around, make sure the males aren't fighting. You have like 1 male per tub and then, you know, euthanize them at the right time so you get the right size. It's more organization than you would imagine trying to maintain all those rats. So that takes a lot of time. The other thing that's kind of frustrating too is you get to the point where you're breeding for a long time and all your males and females start getting really old, and pretty soon you end up with extra large rats that are all the old breeders, and none of the ball pythons will take them because the rats are too big. And I've actually taken some of those rats to the pet store, and not even the pet stores will take them. The only people that will take those really big rats are the people that have really big snakes, like reticulated pythons. That's one of the reasons I got my reticulated pythons, to use up my old rats. Or if you have like a pet alligator or something like that, you know, to use up the old rats. But that was a problem because your freezer starts filling up with all these rats that nobody wants, and it's really hard to get rid of them. It's kind of crazy. The other thing that was kind of frustrating too is the diseases going through the whole colony of rats. I had a couple times where the rats would get some kind of weird disease and they'd all start sniffling and dying, and it was devastating. You know, you really can't feed a sick rat. And back when I had those diseases run through my rat colony, I was actually using antibiotics. Back when you could actually get antibiotics, I was actually using this water-soluble powder, and I'd buy it by the really big bag full, and I'd put it in the water, and that would actually treat them. But now you can't get antibiotics without a doctor's prescription. So you'd have to take your animal to the vet, and then they have to diagnose it. And meanwhile, all your rats are dying. So that's another thing. That's another reason that, you know, I really appreciate the biosecurity over at Rodent Pro, because you get something like that, especially on a really big operation, it can definitely wipe you out. The other thing is getting supplies. So the other thing, you actually have to run around getting the big bags of food, the big bags of bedding, and that can be kind of tedious. And a lot of times I'd bring back, you know, a big bag of rat food home. I'd go down to the feed store, bring back a big bag of rat food. I'd buy them like 6 bags at a time. And then sometimes I'd have like bugs in the rat food, like from the pet store, from the feed store. I actually have bugs in the food, which is kind of crazy. And they were like the only store in all in the surrounding area that would actually carry the Missouri rat pellets. which is kind of crazy. And sometimes with the bedding, certain beddings can kill your rats. You have to make sure you have the right bedding. You have to make sure that it's not moldy. Sometimes I had moldy bedding and I just had to throw it out. So that's kind of crazy. And then you're spending the gas driving around and then lifting the heavy bags. And there's a lot to it, more than you would think, trying to make sure you have enough food and bedding and just all the logistics of that. So that's kind of crazy. So as far as the economics, you know, a lot of people jump into breeding their own rats for the ball pythons. They think, oh yeah, I'm going to make some money. But one thing they don't take into account is their time. So I was spending probably at least 5 hours a week taking care of my rodents. And you figure, you know, down in Denver, a minimum wage is almost 20 bucks an hour. So that's like, you know, if you look at just the minimum wage for taking care of your rats, that's like 100 bucks a week. And right now I get frozen thawed and my bill is like 400 bucks a month, where, you know, just the time spent taking care of the rats was just in the labor. You're actually breaking even, even if you just account for the labor. So I would say if you have a rodent breeding operation, track your time, figure out how much it would cost to hire someone at minimum wage wherever you're at, and then figure that into your expenses. And I almost guarantee that you probably can't break even breeding your own rodents. The only way you could do it is, you know, like these big rodent breeding operations like Rodent Pro. I'm guessing what they probably do is they buy like whole semi-loads full of bedding and whole semi-loads full of food and get that, you know, fraction of a price of the retail price that people are paying. So, I mean, you'd have to really scale up and be really efficient to come out ahead. You have to breed a lot of rodents too. That'd be crazy. Just the logistics of Rodent Pro kind of blows me away. How they can, you know, always have all the stuff available on any size is for every order that I make, which is pretty crazy. All right, so where can I buy rodents, you're probably wondering. Well, if you just have one ball python, I would say you could probably go down to the pet store, any big box pet store, and you're going to be paying a lot of money, probably 2 or 3 times the price, just if you buy one frozen rodent. And if you just have one pet snake, it's not that big of a deal. But once you get into a bigger room like I have with about 60 snakes, that's a lot of mouths to feed. And let me tell you, they'll eat you out of house and home. So you want to find the cheapest place. And the cheapest place I found is like Rodent Pro, some of these places online, where they'll sell you a whole box of fairly inexpensive rodents compared to what you'd find at the stores. I've been to some pet stores where they breed their own rodents, and if you're getting live rodents, they'll mark them up like 2 or 3 times compared to a frozen thawed. So that's the way to go. As a matter of fact, if you're thinking about breeding rodents, that's a great place to get breeders, is to go to a reptile store that sells the live rodents, and you can pick a few up and start breeding them if you want to go that way. All right, so I'm going to jump over the internet and I want to show you Rodent Pro's website. And kind of the interesting thing about Rodent Pro is they sell a lot more than rodents. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people think they just only sell rodents over there. They sell a whole bunch of stuff. They sell crickets and feeders and a whole bunch of stuff other than just rodents. I want to show you that store. I'm going to show you entering in my promo code. There's a promo code underneath this video, so you can actually get a 10% discount. Then I'm going to jump over here and show you some high-end rodent racks in case you want to dive into the deep end, breeding a lot of rodents. And then I want to show you some economical rodent racks. I think I'm actually going to pick up 1 or 2 of those and kind of dabble in breeding mice this year for my hatchlings, since I'm getting back into breeding hatchlings. So let's jump over and check it out. All right, so I'm going to jump over the internet here, and I want to start with this website right here. This is rodentpro.com, and this is where I'm at least once a month over here shopping for rodents. And they have, as a matter of fact, if you actually go over here under the frozen foods, they have mice. I usually get the white mice over here. They have rats, rabbits, guinea pigs, hamsters, gerbils, chickens, and quail. I heard some snakes actually will eat chickens, like the big reticulated pythons, which is kind of interesting. They have live food here. I didn't even realize they had live food like crickets and roaches. As a matter of fact, for a while I was selling dubia roaches. I was like breeding millions and millions of dubia roaches. They multiply like crazy. I got out of dubia roaches, and I'm sure people are coming over here and buying roaches over here. They have mealworms, superworms, waxworms, hornworms, Calca worms, I've never heard of that one. Red wigglers, night crawlers, and fruit flies. They have night crawlers if you want to go fishing. They have other foods coming soon, and then supplies. They have personal protective equipment. They actually sell their gloves and some masks over here. So if you're working with rodents, I'd probably recommend getting like an N95 mask, back to the COVID days, I guess, and wearing gloves with your breeding, when you're breeding rodents and dealing with the rodents and cleaning them out and stuff like that. So I actually came over here. This is where I usually get my white mice. So I usually buy white mice if I like to have some on hand if my ball pythons are fasting. I kind of sneak in a white mouse. And let me tell you, 1 or 2 white mice back to back, and they start going crazy over rodents. And then usually once they start going crazy, you can slip in a rat and get them back on rats. And usually what I do is I come down here to the extra large white mouse over here, 25 for $37. I don't know if you could raise a mouse and you know, carry it all the way up to where it's an extra large and then sell it for a little more than $1 a piece. I don't know. And that's with the shipping too on top of it. So it's free shipping, so you're not paying for the shipping. So without the shipping, you know, that's less than $1 a mouse, which is pretty crazy. I also come over here into the rats. They have pinky rats, fuzzy rats. And if you're wondering, you can actually click on the rat and it'll give you the weight of the rat, which is kind of cool. So if you're transitioning from mice to rats, you can go over, click on the mouse. They give you kind of like a weight range. Then click on the rat and then kind of match up the weight of the rats compared to the weight of the mice. And then you can switch over with the same size rat, which is kind of really cool over here. I usually get the medium rats. This is what I feed on my ball pythons. You see the weight range here is 85 to 174 grams. Sometimes there can be a huge range from the smallest medium rat to the biggest medium rat, which is pretty crazy. But I'd say in most cases, they're pretty much all the same size. So I want to bring you over here. This is where I'm putting an order together over here on rodentpro.com, and I got a bunch of rats, rat pups, medium rats, extra large rats, and some mice over here. The total is $420. And if you actually come all the way to the top, they have a box space. So I have like 2% space left in my box. Sometimes you can get really close, like, you know, 2% left or 1%. Sometimes you can't get that close depending on what you're picking up over here. But I try to make just one box completely full pretty much once a month for my snakes. And then you have a promo code over here. We can type in my promo code, which is Hardwick 10. You see the total here is $420. Just apply the promo code and it takes off 10%. You're saving $42 with that promo code. So be sure to use the promo code. It's actually underneath all my videos. I'll put it in the video description so you can scroll down there. If you forget Hardwick 10, you can go over there, look for the code. I was like searching all over for codes all the time. And then they finally gave me my own. So I just used my own code, which is pretty cool. All right, so if you decide to breed your own rodents, this is the way to go by far. ARS caging setups, and they actually have different rodent systems, the 2020, 1040, 1050, 724, 5032, and each one is different for rats or for mice. So for example, I pulled one up over here. This is the 1040 rat maternity system. This one I haven't actually used over here, but essentially what this is for like taking a pregnant female, bringing it over here, and having the female just have babies all by herself so they don't get trampled by all the other rats. Of course, you can't really raise up the babies very long in here because they're not very big tubs, but you could put a lot of females in here, kind of like a temporary housing for your females to give birth and to raise them up just a little bit to move them to the next stage. They have another one. You can actually see the price over here. This one is $3,195. So these are really high-end, really expensive. And if you actually look at the build quality, these are built really super nice, almost like a really nice powder-coated finishes. These are all the water nozzles going in up on the top. And then in the back, you have like a food bin. These make life so much easier. And then on the top, you actually have a big jug of water, like a 5-gallon pail. that goes through the whole watering system and waters the whole rack all at once. No more bottles on this one. It's pretty much designed for a really efficient, high throughput system. So you can actually take your rats, move it from this one, move it over to here. This is the breeding system, a little bit bigger tubs on this. I had these and it works pretty good. I would actually put one male and two females in here, and then I would actually use one of these. I'd move my females over to a different tub sometimes to give birth by themselves. You'd be better off doing the other system. But then pretty much my bread and butter was this one right here, was the rat grow out. And these are really big tubs. You could put a lot of rats in one of these tubs. So you can actually take the female with their babies, put them back in this tub, and then grow them up until, I'd say, until they're probably like mediums, pretty good size in this tub. You can fit a lot of rats. And they also have mouse setups over here. So this is the original mouse breeding system for $37.95, almost $4,000 for a whole rat rack, or a whole mouse rack over here. And the cool thing about this is you can actually buy these just one level at a time. You can take a look over here. Just a single level is $379. I know all the prices have come up significantly since I actually bought it. I think I bought it at like $250 or something like that. So, you know, two levels is what I had. You could produce quite a few mice with just two levels. And what I actually did is I welded up a little adapter so I could put the mouse rack on top of the rat rack and just some square tubing, and then I just painted it in kind of the same kind of a color, and it matched pretty good and it worked pretty good. I just welded it up with a wire feed welder, and that worked pretty good. They don't have adapters over here, I don't believe, but it would be nice if they actually did, so you could stack different size racks on top of each other. Over here they have some, I was actually considering getting these instead of the smaller tubs, because you could put a whole bunch of mice in here in these really big tubs, which would be kind of cool. The only problem with these big tubs is that the male mice fight to the death. You can only have one male mouse per tub once they mature. And let me tell you, they get really vicious. They are really bad. So, and the other thing is when you have males fighting, they can really stink too. So yeah, it's something about they're giving off the pheromones from the fighting or something like that. You definitely don't want to keep two adult males more than, I'd say probably just one per tub, because yeah, when they're smaller, you can actually have multiple males until they reach that maturity age and they start breeding. That's when they kind of go crazy, which is kind of ridiculous. All right, one more thing I wanted to show you over here real quick is kind of an inexpensive lab mouse cage, which is, I've been looking at these for quite a while. And the only thing I was worried about on these is maybe it was too small, because a lot of these are really small. But this one actually has a video. This is it's a 21-inch by 15-inch by 8 inches tall, which is a pretty big cage over here. And the top pops off, and then on the top you actually just put the food on one side and the water. They actually have a video over here. I wanted to show you the video. I can't really play the video over here on YouTube. I think I might get a, what do they call it? A copyright violation. So what I want to do is I just kind of want to scroll through, but look at how big this is. I didn't realize that they made these lab cages this big. I just want to scroll through it real quick. See, they take the top off. The top snaps right on. They have the little clips, which is cool. Over here, they have the little pop-up dividers, which is nice. They have the water bottle that fits right in there. And then you put the food right in the middle. And then they have the small size here too. So you can get anywhere from the small size to a bigger size. I was thinking kind of like maybe the big size. You could put a lot of mice in a couple of big ones. Then maybe a couple of small ones to keep the males if they start getting ornery, and kind of separate them from the rest of them. I like to just keep just a couple males, maybe 2 or 3 males, and then just randomly put them with the females until the females are bred, and then pull the males back out. So this would be an ideal system, and it's only like $100. And I could probably put that on like some wire shelving or something like that, and have a couple levels. And it's really nice that the top just pops right off. And the other thing I really like about this too is the sides are really high. So if you take the top off, you don't have to worry about the mice jumping out. I was also thinking this might be good for rats too, since it's a really big cage. I don't know if I want to get back into the rats. I'll probably just do mice for the hatchling, and then once the hatchlings are kind of grown up a little bit, it only takes usually like 3 or 4 meals for the hatchling, and then once they're past the 4 meals, they start going crazy. They'll eat anything, even if you put your finger by the hatchling, it'll grab your finger. So at that point, you can easily move them over to some frozen thawed. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Ulrios5716 asks, how do you train your ball python to stay around your neck? And that is a very good question. This is Bobby, my bamboo ball python. We've been doing videos together for probably 6 or 7 years. And when I first started out doing daily videos every single day, let me tell you, he did not want to stay on my neck. He was like trying to jump off my neck, trying to choke me out, doing all kinds of things. And finally, I'd say probably after 3 or 4 months of doing videos every single day, he finally calmed down, finally figured out what I wanted him to do. And it's interesting that you can actually train a ball python eventually to do minor stuff like that. I know a lot of people say you can't really train a ball python, and I think it's because they're really not driven by food like a dog would be driven by food. So you can get a dog to do just about anything, but a ball python will eat and then he's like fine for a whole week. But eventually you can train him to kind of chill out on your neck. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.